And welcome to our July GGDA meeting. That is the one and only Eric Lorenz. You see him over, I guess that's my right shoulder in the video on YouTube. Looking forward to the conversation about games with art, the Avant Beetle pop-ups he's been doing, the queer games he's been curating, and the other, hopefully more events he'll have in the future.
Indeed.
Yeah. We do have some great events coming up for all of you. So let's talk about that, and then we'll dig into Avant Beetle, and I'll be sharing links in the chat. So, we will have another meeting in August 13th. Details to be announced. Later this month, the Indie Cluster will be putting on a bunch of good games at the Southern Fried Gaming Expo. I believe that's the 19th through 21st, so make sure you check that out. At the end of the month, we'll be having... oh goodness, I should have had it written up in front of me. Yes, there's another game at the end of the month, and I'll share it in the chat later. And of course, in September, we'll be having our first Siege Indie Game Fest. The applications are up for that now. We're looking for a broad general audience for that, not our usual audience of game devs. And as my own echo starts confusing me, I'll take off the headphones. And, of course, Dragon Con is coming up at Labor Day weekend. We'll have good video game panels there, as well as the EFF track. And that brings us to a wonderful October with Siege at DreamHack, with all of Games Week events being put on by Skillshot and others. If you want to be part of the Siege Indie Playground at DreamHack, I will have that link up in the chat pretty soon. And then at Shao Kahn, we'll be doing more events. That's all Halloween weekend at the Marriott Century Center near Emory in Brookhaven. All right. With all those events, I'm sure there are more. If folks want to share other events in chat, please do. Welcome to those of you who've already tuned in. Glad to have you here. And looking forward to talking with Eric about Avant Beetle and games as art, because I've been to a bunch of these. I think I've been to all of them.
I think you have. Yeah. You're number one fan.
Muy excelente.
Yeah, and I'm also your number one fan as well, because you always help with some resources, getting to know people and all that.
Well, thank you very much. We'll do a plug for Siege as I hold up my water bottle to the camera. Thanks, Eric. And so, frankly, I've been a big believer that games are art since even before I started working in the games industry. And I think what Eric has put together proves it again and again. So, Eric, why don't I turn it over to you for a little bit, and you just tell us about this whole process. What is Avant Beetle? What's the upcoming event? And how do you choose the games and how you work with the developers? That's not a lot, is it?
No. I mean, I've done this many times, so I almost have it down. Do a lot of talks with like this stuff. But so Avant Beetle is basically like a gallery exhibit displaying various games that are kind of on like, I call it kind of more like the forefront of sort of the avant-garde, like the underground, like various movements that are going on that aren't quite explicitly like super commercial art, super commercial games. And so basically I try to get any kind of game that either asks the question of like, what are games, or like, what can games be, and like how can we utilize games in different forms or aspects that are outside kind of like the AAA space, or even the AA or III, whatever you call it. So to kind of like lift those developers up a little bit and kind of like show other game developers, various, just your average person who's like interested in games or interested in art, and like bridge the gap between games, art, kind of like going in between like things that, you know, normally we'll play like in our living rooms, and bring it into an art gallery space where they can everyone can kind of like have an understanding of like where these games are in, you know, the zeitgeist of games and what they're trying to say. Now I've already lost my train of thought on like some of the other questions, but I can quickly pivot over to like the idea of like video games as art, which to me is kind of, you know, maybe like all encompassing for games as like games in general, it's such a big conglomerate of like various art forms. You have like visuals, sound, you have all these other aspects like UX, everything that's kind of like an art form, and then packaging it in uh, interactivity. So that's like one aspect of it. And then like another one where like Avant Beetle kind of comes in is um, basically, yeah, like looking forward, trying out new things, developing ideas, whether it's like using games as like strictly autobiographical stories or usage of like personal processing, just to kind of like let the rest of the industry know that like people are making these things that are very like personal to them, and then by design, with it being like very personal, to then kind of be like, this is my art, not mine, but like the developers to say like this is what I want to show the world. And yeah, to me that's kind of the highest like form of any kind of art form, which is like very personal stories or very personal like attachments to all of it. But as like my job specifically for this is like technically curator. And so what I like to try to do is come up with like a theme, and then basically like go throughout the internet, get recommendations, and collect basically like a trying to think of the word now, kind of like a through line of like, we have a theme, all these games are talking about something or trying to get like a certain message across, and then I can then choose various games to kind of be like, all right, here we've got like for example, with this upcoming event, the Queer Games, we have different games that are kind of like the ones that are like extremely personal, maybe a little bit heavier, like something that's really like taking a stand, and then other ones that are kind of like more fun, maybe a little playful, like celebratory of queer culture, and everything like in between. And so yeah, my job as like curator is to kind of be like, all right, this will work here, like, and maybe let's get in like this game, ask around, see what other people recommend, and then come up with a lineup. So yeah, this upcoming game show, there's going to be, I think, yeah, there's 10 games, and from developers all over the world. We've got like a couple from like France, Australia. We've got a couple in the US. I think Italy is one. I've got a whole list somewhere, but I don't have it up. But yeah, basically to like know what kind of games that like we want, and to put it in front of everyone to hopefully inspire them, or like at least show them that here's a set of developers who are trying to do something different in the games industry.
Yep, really like that. And it's been interesting because one of the definitions I've heard of for art, and there's no good definition for art, is something designed creatively that enables us or promotes us to stretch our mental, emotional, physical, spiritual capacities. In other words, it's not just doing the same thing over and over again, but something new, something designed to make us look at the universe, the world, ourselves, our inner person in new ways. And it's funny because games certainly make us feel. That's one of the great things about this as a medium. Any game you play, you start feeling. You become entwined with the game itself. But often people will complain that there's a limited range of feelings and experiences you get out of games. So when you're looking at these games that you're curating, what do you think they are trying to have the player experience? What are they trying to get through? Is it just to tell the developer's own personal experience? They trying to open new pathways of thought? What do you feel they're trying to evoke in the player?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the more interesting questions. Like especially with a lot of these games where it's kind of per game basis. So like the benefit of a lot of these like kind of like micro indie games, I would kind of call, and some people call it, is like they don't need to have like an audience output of, or yeah, or basically like an audience outreach to be like, I need you to feel like these things. It can be just as simple as like I think with the last showcase, there was one game where um, the developer was kind of like, this was a very personal game to the point where like I just want to like create a world and like be in that world and just kind of like explore and use it as kind of like a meditation, all the way swinging it into like the other direction of like there's another game that was in the last showcase that was an indifferent wonder of an edible place, where it's like, this is not like as personal from like the development standpoint, but they're trying to like raise awareness for like certain injustices that were going on in India for that game specifically. So like it really runs the whole gambit of like, this is either like just for me and I'm letting it out there in the world just in case anyone else resonates with it, to developers trying to like teach people about like either history or like something that's very important to them. So yeah, it's not the same as like when you get into like more commercial games where like the primary optics for like a good game is like, how well does it sell? Like how big is the player base? And when you have that, you really need to kind of like stress test like the user experience to make sure that like it's fully commercial and you can like give it to someone and be like, you're gonna have fun with this, like you're gonna enjoy it. There's nothing like, there's not as much friction around there, it's like tested, whereas like these games are very much kind of like, not that they don't care or like that's not something that is important to them, but it's like, no, it's my voice that I'm sending out to the world.
Yeah, I love that. So some of these games go from the broadest topics to some of the most personal, most introspective ones as well. And you have reflected on that throughout these series. Can you talk a little bit about the past topics for Avant Beetle and how you've gotten to this point with them? Because you've definitely been, I mean, it's all about stretching the boundaries. So you've been having fun getting people to look way afar of where they would usually look for games.
Yeah. And I guess like question for that, do you mean like the different themes that we've explored in the showcases? Okay, right. Yeah. So the past shows that we've done is kind of like, I think the very first one back in 2018, I believe it was, forever ago, was exploration. So like during that time, there was a lot of like rumblings in the indie sphere of like walking simulators or like things that are just kind of like, they're trying to subvert the video game industry to kind of be like, let's not have like goals, let's not do that, so like let's just explore and have that. So that was the like various aspects of like, what does it mean to like be in a video game and like just explore, like do we need anything? And that's all up to like, you know, the developers, and the curation of that show is very much kind of like varying degrees of like how to answer that question. And then the second one I had was Gallery, which was a really interesting one where like every game was a gallery in of itself. So humorously, it's like a gallery within a gallery. And so each of those games had some form of like, here's a bunch of things that like I want you to go around and like experience, whether that's like through gameplay or more traditional like gallery style, like here's a room for this, here's a room for that. These are all various like aspects of kind of like dealing with, you know, what is a gallery. And I think the third one was puzzle games, which was really fun, where like various developers take the idea of like, what's a puzzle, what's like a fun thing, and then like take their own spin on it. And then the last showcase that I didn't really have so much of, it didn't have like an explicit theme to it, but eventually there became a theme. I called it just the mixtape, mostly because after a long hiatus of not doing these showcases, I just wanted to like get something out there. But if I had to put a theme on it, a lot of it had to do with processing like emotional feelings of yourself, where we had games that were like someone making a game to like help process the like I'm trying to think of the right word. Um, Basically, like a father's like attempted suicide when he was young, and then like unpacking all of that, and then like we walk with him in there, and then with other ones that were like kind of raising awareness, like the Indifferent Wonder of an Edible Place, like I said before, which was kind of like processing something that happened in history, um, and all the way down to this one game called Bus Trip Arcana, which was the game where like they made a game so they could explore and like have their own kind of like meditative moments with it. And so that brings us now to Queer Games, which was this has been like a showcase that I've wanted to make for the last maybe like 3 or so years. But I felt that I didn't have the right curation for it. And then I think around maybe May or so, started reaching out to developers and got a bunch of really good recommendations. And then I was like, all right, let's do the next one. And I'm pleased to say like it's going to be a really good showcase with a lot of really amazing games.
Very cool. Now, you and Brooke Berg are going to stream some of these games for us tonight. Give us a sneak preview. And I'd love to have a conversation briefly between you and Brooke about the games, what kind of experiences they evoke for you. But before we do that, you have seen a lot of people go through Avant Beetle now. Mainly developers, but a lot of non-developers as well. What kind of experiences do you think they have? Are there like general ranges of experiences, invigorated, enthused, befuddled, etc.?
Yeah, I definitely arrange within the caveat of like it's all been really positive. And so for the most part, everyone is at least at the minimum level, kind of like, oh, this is really interesting, like looking at games in a different way. And that's almost like the minimum that I've seen, all the way up to like uh, people being like really inspired by like either all of the games or like one specific game, um, to then kind of be like invigorated and be like, oh, this is like relighting like a creative spark, to have the allowance to basically like do things in your own way, in the way that like you want to do. And then um yeah, like I always enjoy a lot of like college students who come out to this, because I don't, depending on like where what they know about like smaller indie devs, um sometimes if they don't know much about it, like they're like, oh my gosh, this is really cool, like you can take like, and not everything has to be like super polished or like AAA quality to tell like a meaningful story. Because I know, I think when I was in college, like this would have been something that would have just absolutely sparked like creative integrity in me. So hopefully, for anyone coming to the shows, this can kind of like further that for yourselves.
Very cool. Before we bring Brooke into the conversation, Marcy Pratchett has a couple good questions on YouTube. Um, the first one is, as a game dev, can you talk about the choices you make with regards to how much agency you give players when it comes to how you want to sculpt your user experience? And we're not the actual makers of these games, but Eric, can you talk to that? What you have seen, the devs who you have chosen for these? What?
Yeah. So it, like, of course, like any of these games, it's definitely a range. Um, and it really all depends on like what they're trying to say about games. And so like we've had various games that are like maybe player antagonistic towards like how everything is set up, and like that's specifically something that like they're intentionally trying to create to further what they're trying to say, either about the content of the game or about the games industry, and all the way down to extremely open, like almost like a toy, because like if in certain games, like let's say like an open world game, yeah, the player agency is kind of like, yeah, go ahead, like do whatever, but there's still always some kind of like goal, and it's always trying to like steer you towards that. Where like some games, like I want you to play with it and like have fun, or like get whatever it is that I'm trying to have you get out of it.
Excellent. Marcy had a follow-up to that. How and she does it as an example, but I think it's a separate question that deserves to be addressed. How does the affordances of video games make it different from working in other medium? And certainly we love the interactivity, but I'll throw that one to you.
Yeah, the affordance, without going like just broad stroke, it's the interactivity part of it. I think there's something really powerful about kind of like the development style of video games, because it's very, I want to say, like non-destructive. So, let's say if you're making like a film or like a short film, um, whenever you can make like a cut and then be like, all right, well now we're doing this, and that's like almost like, that's like it is what it is. It's going through this. But like with a game, you can kind of be like, well, let me just update this model, see how it looks. Let me make the walls now just pictures of my dog or something, and you can click it, and so then you can kind of like experiment and play with that. But as for the getting into like the interactivity part of it, which I believe is kind of the most profound aspect of like thinking about art as video games as art, which is like, you're the one steering everything, and like you're the one making the decisions to kind of be like, yes, I will go forward with it. And like I've had conversations with some other people about, like whenever you're playing a game and you just walk forward. And I think one showcase during the exploration, someone was kind of like, well, why don't they just put them on rails? Like, this doesn't have to be interactive. I'm just walking forward. And kind of cheekily, I was like, yeah, but you're the one who's walking forward. Like, you can stop playing, but like, if you want to keep engaging with it, you have to, keep holding down W, or so to say.
Yeah, and there've been movies about people walking inside of pieces of famous artwork. But in this case, you're really doing it. You're actually getting inside. You're looking around a Monet from the inside, going where you want to go in the Monet, checking out the colors and the vibrancy in the way you want to do it. I'm using that obviously as an analogy, but it gives you the chance to really play around with a shared piece of art someone else has created that you get to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Brooke, if you're willing to step on in, Brooke has checked out a couple of these games to stream. I'd love your thoughts, Brooke, just initial impressions of them and why some of them jumped out to you as an artistic creation more than others did.
Hi, I'm Brooke. My pronouns are she and pup. I was honestly looking for those that were wilder or represented me in some other way. So the two that caught my eye, I can't say this one because its name, but he effed the girl out of me by Taylor McHugh, and the other one, Sex at Alexanderplatz, by Fantasia Malware, which just looks absolutely bizarre in the coolest way. And that was what stood out to me.
Very cool, very cool. As a let's get highfalutin about it. As an artistic creation, did they evoke a certain experience in you that more standard commercial games don't?
If that one's for me, then I haven't played these yet, but I haven't kind of like seen something like Sex at Alexanderplatz since what Hypnospace Outlaw.
Oh yeah.
So in like the commercial game scene, graphics like this is just few and far between.
All right,
Yeah, and yeah, if I might interject, Fantasia Malware, they're in Germany, I think Berlin, if I recall correctly. They've always had this like really wild, like chaotic art style that's been like a through line in all of their games. Yeah, and they always deliver. So anyone listening, like go check out Fantasia Malware. They're amazing.
Oh, now I really hate that the game was crashing for Brooke recently. All right, well, with that, Brooke, if you want to share screen and start showing off this effing game, and I apologize for us having to use that ridiculous abbreviation, but don't want to get any content strikes on the channels. So as Brooke gets ready to share screen, Eric, can you tell us anything about this game and why you chose it?
Oh yeah. So game's title, he effed the girl out of me. Sorry, Taylor. We don't want to get flagged for anything on Twitch, but this game is an extremely powerful kind of like autobiographical piece about Taylor's experience, like basically transitioning. And I'm trying to like find like the right way to like kind of explain the game. But really, it's kind of like a memoir. It's something that she felt like she really kind of like had to make in order to overcome various like traumas that she's experienced while transitioning, and to put it into a game and like to kind of like go through every detail, every like bits of the story of what she was going through. To her, like we were chatting about it before, and like I have her artist statement. She really felt it was important to put the story out into the world, to kind of like give, and like I'm stumbling because like I don't want to put any kind of like words into this because it's such a nuanced feeling for her. So I'm trying to be very careful not to, to assume or like fill in any gaps that I might not have. But it's definitely like an extremely powerful game. I remember when I first played it, it was kind of one of those games where like I felt closer to the author because it was such a raw story about basically our main character is trying to get some extra money for hormone treatment and has a friend who is works as a sex worker and goes along with her to kind of be like, all right, we can like try this out, see if you like it, and then starts getting into it. But as the title suggests, certain things kind of come out of it, and it's the story of that that journey, and then also how she like then overcame the trauma by like talking about it. And there's a lot of like really beautiful prose on kind of like how she was feeling during the time, and like various bits of like conversations that she's had with other people, excuse me, and yeah, like in such a very like simplistic art style, and like as you can see, the main character is like this kind of like cute, almost cartoony ghost, to kind of like help alleviate like certain aspects of like how heavy the story is. And I think like, maybe it could have come from like something maybe tongue in cheek, or like that's just kind of like a little avatar that she really likes. But yeah, just to kind of like bring forth like all these ideas, her experiences throughout this whole journey.
And it's fascinating to have a game that actually deals with trauma. So many games use trauma as a motivating force. I mean, every role-playing game, your family's been killed, you need to save the earth. I just remember playing Icewind Dale long ago, and it was like the millionth time my family had been killed, and I had to save the universe. So my entire ability to deal with this trauma of my parents being killed is, well, save the earth, and everyone will be happy.
Yeah, so, and it like it does a good job at like letting the game be like the main source of like the process, like, to process these experiences and these feelings.
Yeah, I'm also loving the representational art so far. Like you said it's a ghost. I thought of it as a little bird, an innocent bird moving on through. And the artwork itself, for the people encountered along the way, has been fascinating, because that could be erotic content, but there's been nothing erotic about it so far. You're definitely feeling the building of the experience this person had. Brooke, I'd love your thoughts on the art of this.
I agree that there's definitely a dissonance between the simple representation and the very personal and traumatic story that's being retold.
Yeah,
and we're getting into the depths of it now.
Yeah, and I also think that it's like the accessibility of like this kind of like art style, the very it's not like 1-bit, sorry, it like oh, someone help me out here. Like the 8-bit like aesthetic of like style really helps. And like Brooke, because I know you also do a lot of development in like this kind of style, but would you agree that like it's easy to like iterate on? I mean, quote unquote easy to iterate on like anything that is a game, but it helps the accessibility of like, I have an idea, I want to, make that into a game, and without being like, oh well, I have to, do lighting, do shaders. It's very simplistic, and it's not trying to like lift up visuals in a way that you see in like the games industry.
Say it is easy to iterate upon to a point. When you get to like more detailed depictions, like the image we had a little bit ago that was full screen, that gets more involved than this little sprite work. I think that it does still elevate kind of the art, because it's a way to have a very more personal touch to it. You can see every single pixel. You can see the work that it went into it, versus like a lot of photorealistic stuff that just convinces you that it's just there. It's harder to see like the work or the human touch that went into it.
Yeah, and that's a good point of like, especially with like this style, every bit is so intentional. So every single frame is placed because that's what Taylor decided what she wanted to do with, like, even on this screen that you have right here, like just the light orange kind of coming down, and to be like, well, other AAA games can be like, well, yeah, just add reflection on it, but like to actually go in and be like that pixel, that one, and then to create it from there.
This palette, I think, has like 6 colors in it, maybe, but it's still very evocative.
Yeah.
This is why I love having developers have these conversations. You get the insights you don't get just from folks who haven't been deep in the weeds on it. And it's fun with the art because when we see art like this, we expect 8-bit music behind it, happy, jolly, and not this raw commentary that's being written underneath it. So I really love how it flips the convention of the industry on its head. Like right here, I expect a fun little maze game to be happening, but that's absolutely not what's going on.
Yeah, it's more like subverting the expectations, like you say. That's like, oh, well, we know something like this very top down, and you got like various obstacles in the way. Like, okay, it's a maze, but this one's kind of more like we're going forward, and metaphorically, I'm being presented with 2 doors. Both of them disappear, and it's kind of like it's the idea of a maze going thematically of like, this is the maze that I'm going through while like trying to decide whether or not to make this game.
And what's extra funny is as a game dev, we use mazes to keep the players within areas we want them to go. And that wasn't the case there because you were not able to go through those doors or anything. It was to really illustrate the financial and family situations that the developer was having. We had another great question from Marcy Pritchett on YouTube. Do you think it's a metaphor for how the dev feels she has to repackage her story for some people's consumption?
Absolutely do think that. There's a lot of like tiptoeing around kind of like what happened because you don't know how people might react. That was some of the conversations at the start were very on the nose about that, about not knowing how other people would react, and you might feel betrayed, or they might betray you, or unpredictable, and it's a very tough topic to deal with.
Yeah, Marcy, if you have more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. It's interesting that instead of a health bar, we have a whole commentary on the health industry and the health insurance industry as well.
Yeah, and I'm pulling up Taylor's artist statement right now so I can talk through it, because it definitely helps. Like, you can get what you can out of like a playthrough, and one of the amazing things about any kind of art form and medium is like what you take away from it, but also to hear an artist's intention on that, just kind of like adds an extra layer of like things to look out for, things for themes that like she might be wanting to put in this game. And I'll read the artist statement here. It's the pain from the shame I had was so strong that it made me suicidal. The way to overcome shame is to talk to people about it, but the fear was so overpowering that I just couldn't. It froze me. So I was pinned between 2 things, the fear and shame. I wanted the pain to stop at any cost. Instead of suicide, I made a machine to explain all the things I was afraid to say. So this is what you have in front of you. Making this game was an act of self-destruction and an attempt to survive at any cost. It was petty and desperate, but I wanted to F things up so badly that I'd never be able to go back into hiding again. So that's just a testament to like really the courage that it takes to take a story that you feel you need to like process and to share it out into the world. And in some of my conversations with Taylor, she was very, very adamant about like, there were a couple other games like throughout the years that kind of like helped her to like overcome certain fears and to be like, oh look, like someone else is making a game that's diving into various like personal traumas that the developer might have gone through. um, this maybe could be something useful and like something that definitely helps. um, and like my partner Molly is an art therapist, and we've talked about this game and like many other games, just during our like downtime. And she's very adamant on like, yeah, like in order, like things that can help process various traumas or like certain emotions or things that you're trying to get through is to like externalize it. And what that does is it kind of helps you to um, solidify it in a way that's, I don't want to say like distanced from yourself, but like you're thinking about it intentionally, and like how you think about it like while you're going through that. It's almost like a grief. Like if you've ever lost a loved one, um, you can either like bury it away and kind of like try not to think about it, but that's going to end up like bubbling up. So the pain of like coming out and talking about things might be extreme and like might even feel crippling almost. But every time you do it, you chip away at basically the thing that um you don't want to like talk about anymore. But like by talking about it, it helps you kind of like come to peace with it.
Yeah, fascinating. And it's really interesting because another way it flips the conventions on its heads are in classic games. When you change into another form, you get more powerful. It is about becoming more capable of overcoming obstacles, trashing your enemies, Transformers style, classic example. But this is very much about becoming more who you want to be rather than someone who can crush your enemies and see them wail before you. So I just love how it's taking a basic idea in games, changing your form, and setting it up in a different way than we're used to in commercial games. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I'd love to see another game. So, Brooke, really appreciate it. Before we change it over to Eric streaming a game, any last thoughts on this one?
No, I'm just engrossed in it, in the story. But this is probably a good stopping point. This is where it's gonna hit harder.
Okay.
But it's a very touching, very personal story. So I'd recommend everyone checking it out, either on their own or at the Avant Beetle. When is that?
Yeah, so it's going to be July 26th through 28th. And um, funny enough, regarding this game, I'm going to be holding a raffle because Taylor gave me 2 Game Boy cartridges. So she ported the game to a cartridge, and if you donate extra money to it, you can be entered in a raffle and like own a physical copy of this game that you can play on a Game Boy if you wanted.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's super impressed by it.
Brooke, really appreciate you showing this game off. And if you haven't checked out Brooke's streams in the GGDA channel, some wonderful stuff on using Pico, and also on Neurodivergent. So check it out. I'll share some of those links later on. And Brooke, please hang around and comment on Eric playing Eric's games. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off Brooke's stream. And Eric, if you want to share, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, let me just put on my headphones so we don't get too much bleed. All right. Okay, and gonna share my screen, and we've got this one. Let's go live. All right, are you able to see it? Oh, do you not see this part of it? Oh no. All right. All right. Here, let me stop that. Oh darn. Um, oh, I did applications. Okay. No, I have multiple ones. Green 3. All right. Hello, everyone. Okay. Well, I guess first off, can you see the game? Oh, wonderful. Okay. So this game is called Player Non-Player. It's by a developer named Jonathan Corin over in France. And this game's definitely, it's a foot in kind of like the weird art style. It's got a foot in personal relationships, trying to kind of like talk about themes of like death, consent, friendship, like love, platonic or romantic. And what we do, I'll just get it started and let me know if the audio is too loud or too soft. Okay. Andrew says all good. So basically, the idea of this game is we create a character and we're set off onto this island that has various like brutalist structures, very like kind of open, takes a page from like open world. But on that island there are various inhabitants who we then have to basically like either befriend or like kind of like help them process things that like they're going through, and then to like maybe mild spoilers to basically send them off into either like the spirit world, like send them off to their death or learn about their death. It's very abstract in the way that it's presented, so I think a lot of that's kind of like up to the player on like how you take it. So here we are in our little character creation. This is kind of like where some of the fun silliness comes in, so I can give myself just a little waist, a nice penis, a good size. All right, beautiful. Am I right? We're looking great. We're ready to go off into the world.
Word.
All right, so here's just the initial. So yeah, there's a lot of like brutalist structures in this game, which is always fun. I'm personally a fan of brutalist aesthetics. It's got like a big oppressive kind of feel to it. And the main input that we have here is a little caress. So we have this thing, we give it a nice pet. And then we can grab objects. And then we're sent off into the world. So there's definitely many ways to interpret this game. And if anyone comes out to the showcase, I would love to hear how you interpret some of the themes that are involved in this. And so here we are, we're at the top of the world, and then we're gonna come on down. Yeah, so Jonathan Corin, based out of France, he, I think he's maybe made like 1 or 2 games before, but he has like a very distinctive style. So I believe it's a little bit kind of tongue-in-cheeky, a little bit glitchy, but yeah, he develops with like a bunch of other French developers. They're pretty big in like the art scene, like in France, which is really fun to hear about because apparently they have some really like good interactive media, like new media, kind of like developers who are over there. Sorry, I'm missing this initial part. Alright, so we meet our first introductory character, and they're gonna basically show us around.
I'm immediately struck by the sense of othering with your character being made out of stone, and the next character you see is just a regular looking human, and being able to like see your feet and your arms as you walk or as you fall, just as a constant reminder of that difference.
Yeah, and I think it's like depending on how you take the themes of the game, like I kind of take that as like, well, I'm definitely like, I'm not like part of them. I'm not like a human per se, but you know, like quest wise, I've basically been given these tasks to befriend everyone on this island and help them like through their things. So almost like maybe higher power sort of thing, or just like another like helper, an outside non-observer.
So we had a couple other questions in the chat. James Cole was noting how the gameplay is both smooth and glitchy, and you were talking about the glitchiness being part of their aesthetic. Do you think that's a conscious choice? Because I really see how that helps, because it forces you to be aware. You can't just slide into the game. You stay aware that you're in a virtual experience.
Yeah, and like all the way to like, I can jump like this high, and so it's, you know, you've got like a little hoverboard on here, and you know this map is like very large, and not to say that like, you know, I wouldn't just walk all the way down to the other side of it, like I can easily like hoverboard to it, but it's almost like putting the lens on like video games itself and being like, yeah, isn't it kind of silly that I can just jump to this height? You know, it kind of like reminds you that we are in like a video game.
It is a good shadow, actually. That's surprising. Marcy Pratchett says, hi, Brooke, and had another comment question. These games demonstrate well that game dev can be very interpersonal. In y'all's experience, does an emotionally evocative game made by a team of people amplify or muddle the voices of the artist?
That is a good question. I mean, I think, again, it's just it depends on the execution of the game and of the story and the experience. The benefit of having like a single developer is kind of like, I don't want to call it like non-collaboration, but you kind of like get a very singular like piece of it. But I have seen some really good like deeply personal games that are made by a team of people. The thing about it is just you kind of have to have like a singular like goal in mind to have this. And that's also not to say that like when people collaborate, they can't form their own like personal experience, like to create a game's themes around. But there's less restraints whenever the smaller the team is.
Of course, Eric, that's your experience in a lot of these games because you are the audio person. You're often very separate from the rest of the team. Is that how you experience as well? Because some of the games you've worked on are definitely pretty artistic.
Yeah, and like that's kind of the job of, like, depending on the project, it's the job of like the helpers, like in my case for audio, to kind of like understand what the main creative lead is like trying to say. And even like on the current project that I'm on, it's very much kind of like, you know, if you don't know what story you're trying to tell, even in just the audio space, like you can go to the creative lead and kind of be like, hey, I have an idea, like what if it sounded like this? And they can be like, I like that idea, but it's not quite the story that I want to try and like say for this specific thing. And then so then you kind of collaborate on like the central idea.
I really hope we get Jesse or Duff Jacobson in here. They have a game in the Museum of Modern Art in New York right now.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And done by small teams, and it's very interesting because they manage to keep everyone kind of within the artistic focus of the team, even if it's primarily the lead's vision. I mean, games done well are very much not just an interactive experience, but they're an interactive process. You don't do well having a programmer work on a game who can't give their input about how they could best develop something. So,
Yeah. And yeah, I think like a lot of really good ideas can also come from collaboration. Like maybe if you're making something but you don't really know the right words for it or like the right music, maybe you're like, oh, maybe we have this track A playing on this scene, but like maybe you get a musician who is kind of like, what about this? And they can then show you like, oh, no, like I resonate way more with track B that you made rather than A, which I placed in here. And so yeah, there's like, not to sound like a broken record, but everything's kind of relative, and it just really depends on what the outcome is, and hopefully
I'd like to add
that you can do. Yeah,
do it, Brooke.
I don't think like the kind of personalness is really necessarily tied to if it's made by one person or a small group, but really a matter of how much love is put into it. I've made games that I really loved that felt very personal. I've made and seen stuff that is less personal and still quality and good in other ways, but you can feel kind of like the lack of intimacy within the game.
yeah, no, I totally agree with that as well. Sorry, I got distracted because
You're having an adventure.
unfortunately I was dragging this person. But yeah, no, I think like there's so many different ways to make a game and to make the story that you want to make. And like if you're having collaborators, it's good to have like a good personal relationship with them, so that way like you can see eye to eye to help remove any kind of like friction of like, I don't know, whether if it's like ego or like I don't know, like not taking any risks, but like to have like a safe space to either take the risks that you need to take or kind of like just talk about the same thing, like what you're trying to make.
And to go with what Brooke was saying, I've worked on games that we were aiming for both commercial success and artistic success. And it is interesting with that small team, keeping everyone trying to go to their artistic best. In our case, of course, it was tabletop games, Vampire, and trying to have the writing, the player experience, the art, the graphic design, all of them combine to create an experience that would both succeed emotionally and financially. And now, when I will not say we manage the things that Eric talks about, the team working together, avoiding friction, etc. So it is fascinating how sometimes that creative process can come out of a group that is not necessarily working well together. We've seen that with bands as well that have done great work while they were falling apart. It's another good metaphor, or another good analogy. So Eric, how is this game making you feel?
This game makes me feel wonderfully confused, like that kind of surreal space that you get when you're kind of confronted with the really like kind of the unknown, or like I don't want to say like unsettling, but when you have a really elongated pool in this what looks like a meteor landscape. You're just feeling a little bit vulnerable and just wanting to just understand what's going on.
All right, well, excellent. Well, we're at our hour point. I appreciate everyone who's tuned in. Any last questions are definitely appreciated. Last comments from anyone in the chat. Eric, definitely, please, again, tell everyone where they can go find Avant Beetle.
Yeah, so you can find Avant Beetle on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The handles or the ways to find it is just look up Avant Beetle. It's AVANT BEETLE. And you can also go to the website avantbeetle.com. We have links for RSVPs to come out to the show, donations, which I will say the shows are always free, but donations are strongly encouraged, and the donations go to either the developers themselves or a charity of their choosing if they choose to opt out of donations.
We had one more very important question about the games. Brooke, what's your favorite kind of dog?
King Charles Cavalier.
And I think you know who that question came from. All right. Brooke, any last comments? Working on any new projects other than the commercial ones?
I am currently recovering from bottom surgery, and I'm trying to make a game based on my experience. But I'm not very far along, and I'm kind of stumped. So we'll see if that comes to fruition.
Everyone's played surgeon games where the best part was messing up. So, Chanel, any questions for the folks before we end the meeting?
When is the next event?
We'll do our next GGDA meeting August 13th. We got the Southern Fried Gaming Expo coming up 19th to 21st. James Cole, you are in the chat. If you have any info on the Indie Cluster area at Southern Fried Gaming Expo, please put it in there. And there's a really fascinating D&D game being played by our own Bob Carter and a bunch of other voice actors. So that's the Friday night at Southern Fried Gaming Expo. So I strongly recommend checking that out.
So it's not online. I have to attend the event, right?
Right. Southern Fried Gaming Expo is in person at the Cobb Galleria.
But it's on August 13th.
I'm sorry, the August 13th event, we haven't announced yet. That one will be in person. I'll have more information about that when we finalize the details.
Well, you're talking about July 19th to the 21st.
Right. That's the Southern Fried Gaming Expo at the Cobb Galleria. That is the Indie Cluster is organizing the indie game area there. That's not a GGDA event, but it's one that we recommend you go check out games, support indie developers, and start working with them.
Okay. All right, and then August 13th, we'll have the real meeting.
That's exactly right. And we'll have more Siege info then.
Okay, but August 13th will be in person, right?
Yep. More
all right,
details
thank you.
to come. Absolutely. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for asking.
Oh no! Oh, that's totally fine. Much appreciated. Hey, thanks for having me. Bye.